Hello, everyone, and welcome to Daily Grace with Pastor James. Thank you for joining me in this part 3 of surviving marital storms. We've been talking about how to survive marital storm for the past 3 weeks now. And today is the concluding part, which is the part 3 of surviving marital storms. In a world where divorce seems to be the norm, rather than the abnormal. How do we survive marital storms? We looked at it using Jesus's instructions as the foundation in Matthew 7:24 to 25. We read it, and there it says that the only way you can survive marital storm is for you to build a strong house. And how can you build a strong house? The only way you can build a strong house is to build it on the right foundation. And the right foundation, we did see that it is what God says marriage should be. It is what God says that marriage should actually entail. And we looked at several things. We looked at 3 external forces that can damage your home. There we say culture. We looked at crisis. And of course, we also talked about change. So for the part 1, we looked at the culture. We discussed extensively about culture. And then the part 2, we talked about crisis. We did mention that there are some crises that can rock your marriage if you are not prepared for them. And then we looked at some of the stressful crises that we go through in marriages. Sometimes death of a child, when one spouse is unfaithful, major financial difficulty in your marriage, miscarriage or stillborn, major illnesses in the marriage, death of a close friend, siblings squabbles, especially in this country where children are seriously looked at and viewed if anything happens to them. So those are the major crises that you could have. And when it happens, what are you going to do? We say you should hold on to God's promise in Isaiah 43. Isaiah 43, when you read 1 to 3, the Lord says you should fear not. And the promise came in verse 2. It says, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burnt, nor shall the flame scorch you. That's a great promise that God has given to us as His children. So when you are in the marriage and the storms come, there's some storms of crisis. What do? You do 3 things. We did mention this last episode, that is the part 2. And of course, we explained it. So you should relax in God's plans. 2, you should recognize God's presence in whatever situation you're going through. And the 3rd thing is you should rely on His protection. And we did mention that the key to coping with crisis in your marriage is commitment, total commitment. And then today, part 3, which is the final part, is talking about the wind of change. We need to prepare for the wind of change. Change is something that will happen in our lives. There is no life that is static. Change is part of life and no one can avoid it. It's inevitable. It will come. It is just a question of when. Everything changes with time except God, which is unchangeable. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1 says, to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. So there are seasons, even in marriages, there are seasons. There are seasons that would come. Marriage is in stages. The first stage is the honeymoon stage. That is when everything is honey. That's when everything is looking so good. That is the honeymoon stage. And then you can move to probably the childless stage. You can then move to decision whether you want to have children or not. You can move to the stage of raising your children, especially when it gets to the stage of raising teenagers. That is where you will know that you are really, really in business. Everything in life changes. And if you don't learn how to prepare for this change, if you don't learn how to cope with the change, it is going to sweep you unawares and it is going to be devastating in your marriage. Your marriage is dynamic. It's not static. It's always, always changing. It's either getting better or it's getting worse. It's either deteriorating or it is improving. You are either growing together or you are growing apart. There is no marriage that stands still. None. We know that in marriages, some changes are not pleasant. Some things you experience, some things you go through in marriages from day to day, they are not pleasant. Proverbs 20, verse 30 says this. It says, blows that hurt cleanse away evil, as do stripes the inner depth of the heart. Sometimes it takes painful situations, painful circumstances to make us to change our ways. Painful situations in our life. It could be extremely painful, very, very painful, but the question is this. Do you let those painful changes in your marriage make you bitter, or you let them make you better? The choice is yours. You can either allow the situations, the pain that you're going through, to make you bitter or to make you better. You can either reject it. You can pretend it doesn't exist, but it does. You can resist it and fight it. You can resent it. Whatever decision you take, it is your decision to ensure that the changes that occurs in your marriage does not rock the boat. So then, what is the secret of coping with this wind of change that we have been talking about? Let's look at Philippians 4. Philippians 4, 11 and 13. Paul talking here. He said, not that I speak in regards to need, for I have learnt in whatever state I am to be content. That's number one. Then verse 13 says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So in that place, Paul is saying that I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I find myself. I am ready for anything through the strength of Christ. So he is saying that we should put up three different attitudes. We should have three attitudes when these changes come. One, we should be contentment. Secondly, we should be flexible in our ways. Most of us are so rigid. And third thing, we should have faith. Contentment simply means that you would need to enjoy the present moment, irrespective of what you're going through. Enjoy it because you don't have any other time. Be flexible. Change with the change. Adjust your ways. Don't be so rigid, and have faith in Jesus Christ that He would see you through. Thank you so much for listening to me in this episode. If this episode has blessed you, please share it with other people. Once again, my name is Pastor James Egudibe, and I pastor RCCG Solid Rock Parish, Derby, 55 Booth Lane, DE 22 3UD. If you are looking for a Bible-believing church, we welcome you with an open arms. Thank you, and God bless you. Bye.